So first of all, I'd just like to say good morning, Borodar. Jane, if you'd like to say good morning to everyone.
Borodar, everybody. Jane Crawley-Adams from the Health, Wellbeing and Equity team.
Fab. And our secondary expert, we like to tap into Jane's knowledge and expertise around that. And actually, we got, the three of us have got a, experience right the way across from 3 to 16. So at that point, I'd like to say morning to Borodar to Gaynor. The purpose of this morning is hopefully you're in the right place. You've come to find out a little bit more about developing independent learning provision, making your learners more independent. And hopefully by the end of the programme, you will have a better understanding of independent learning, because I've heard in many scenarios people saying, well, what does it actually mean? What does independent learning mean? So we're going to explore that, and it's something we explored with our development group. We're going to spend a little bit of time thinking and understanding how to develop a whole school approach to your independent learning, but particularly considering, those enablers of the role of enabling adults, the importance of effective environments, and obviously the need to have engaging experiences to engage and excite your learners. And as part of that, whatever we do in any aspect of school improvement, we will talk to you about how you're going to evaluate that impact on the learning in your schools and settings. So hopefully you're in the right place and that was what you were expecting this morning. Okay, so just a little bit about the programme itself. When you booked on in the professional learning offer, you probably only saw 2 sessions, the introductory session, which is today, a virtual session, and actually then the session that will come back together again online to review and reflect and refine towards the end of November. What we're hoping then is after today's session, and we've sort of sparked your thinking and tried to ignite some thoughts around independent learning, we're going to invite you then to visit some schools across the region. All of these schools are at various different points of their development journey, but have all had a focus on independent learning. We'll tell you a little bit about what's special about each of them, and they've all got wonderful stories to share. And they're open their doors for a morning for 3 hours for you to go and learn about their independent learning journey, see children and staff working in the environment, working independently, collaboratively, and so on and so forth. So we'll share those booking links with you during the session, and hopefully then you'll be able to book in some visits. So you can go to all of them if you've got the capacity. Some of them, when you look at some of the areas of their strengths, there may be certain aspects of things you'd like to go and see. So hopefully then you'll get a really rich experience of where you'd like to take, your independent learning, but give you some inspiration and some opportunities to refine and reflect what's going on in your schools. Okay, so what are we going to do today then? So predominantly today we're going to consider developing independent learners and that professional learning experience overview, which we've just discussed. I want you to reflect around what you want to get from this professional learning experience. If you go and visit schools, given a half day today and later on in November, it's a big amount of time. So what are you hoping to get from it? We're going to talk to you about independent learning in the main. So what's happening nationally and locally, and why is it becoming more of an emerging theme for schools to prioritise in terms of the SDP priorities possibly. We'll chat to you around what we've explored as the characteristics of effective independent learning. We're going to share some resources and professional learning materials that we hope will help you on your own journey. And then at the end of the session, we'll just consider some next steps, think about your independent learning visits, and then think about how you may want to develop this as a priority for improvement. So providing you with some support and guidance around that. And I could just see Gaynor's popped her camera on. So morning, Gaynor, and lovely to see you. Okay. So first of all then, it would be lovely now if at this point you can switch your cameras on, because it would be lovely to see your faces and not feel like I'm just talking to myself or just to Gaynor and Jane, because they're sick of listening to me. It would be lovely just for you to hear your voices, really, just to know who are you, and I know some of you, where you're from, so which school or setting you're from, what's your current role, and what are you hoping or what do you want to get from this professional learning experience, because you've obviously invested some time. And hopefully you'll be able to do some visits. So what are you hoping to get? So I'm just going to give you a few minutes just to have a little think about that.
Yeah, all good. So I'm Matthew McCabe, head teacher at Tenworth Primary School in Newbridge, and I've got my assistant head
Gemma James.
next to me. So we just want some clarity around, I suppose, you visited us in April,
Yeah.
Deb, as you know, and we just want some clarity around what that looks like. So we had lots of conversations on that day about enabling adults and independent learning. So we just want to look at some clarity around that, and it'd be good to see other schools as well. So that's great.
Brilliant. Lovely. Great start. Thanks, Matthew. Well, luckily we have planned to cover off some of those things and start to, channel your thinking really around those. But hopefully, you'll be able to go and see some of that in practice. And the schools are really keen to welcome you all. So you'd be very welcome to go and visit every setting if you can possibly. But we've tried to keep them to sort of half days to make it a little bit more manageable for you to get out and about, because we understand how difficult that is. Okay. Thanks, Matthew and Gemma. Anyone else would like to go next?
Do you want me to go next, Deb?
Cheers, Nick.
So I'm Nick. I'm head teacher at Shinington Primary School. Independent learning is on our school development plan this year, and we're looking for ways in which we can define the progression. So what that looks like through those progression steps, from children entering school at reception to what they should look like and what it should look like as they leave us and go up to the secondary school. So and how we do that whilst maintaining a focus on standards, and how I do it and integrate it in an already busy schedule in terms of school improvement.
Yeah. Okay. We've got lots of schools have already started that journey and considering that, and we'll talk to you a little bit about that later. I mean, luckily we're all primary I think practitioners on the call. We have had some secondary schools involved in the project actually, and they're part of the learning visit. And I think you're right, we need to see independent learning as integral to our teaching and learning offer and our whole school approach to teaching and learning. It's not something separate, it's not something different. So I think, there'll be lots of food for thought to help hopefully shape that thinking for you. But there's some schools who've particularly thought about progression in their provision and the expectations of those three enablers. So we'll probably, between the three of us, be able to talk to you a little bit about where that might be beneficial for you to particularly go and visit. Although they've all thought about it, but I think there's some who've really sort of dug deep into trying to define what that looks like progressively across the school in terms of provision and what the children should be doing as a result. So great. Cheers, Nick. That's lovely. Okay, who'd like to go next?
I'm happy to go next, Sharon from Vocro.
Oh, Sharon, morning.
Yeah, bore da. I'm the head teacher of Vocro Primary, and I'm on this course really to just see practical strategies to overcome barriers for independent learners in areas of high disadvantage, because the children in these areas in particular can be quite needy, and the role of the adults traditionally, want to help those children and, overcompensate really. So practical examples of how adults have taken a step back and the culture of those schools, and also seeing the journey of the children, because I try to be as independent as I can be when I'm covering lessons, and when I employ strategies not to immediately help the children, they see that as a downside. Why isn't Miss helping me straight away? So it's about the culture change really, and how obviously with children, lots of children, especially in areas of high disadvantage, they need to self-regulate their learning, and practical approaches for self-regulation of learning in conjunction with independent learning, because the children aren't sort of always compliant and ready to be independent. So it's overcoming those barriers in particular.
Yeah, I mean, there's such a lot there, and things
Yeah,
you've touched on. Yeah, and I think you're right. All those things are important, and I think Jane particularly will talk to us around the offer that's inclusive, particularly for undisadvantaged learners. But what we do know is that high quality teaching and learning benefits everybody, particularly those groups of learners. So that's something I know Jane will pick up as we go through the session this morning. So, again, lovely to see you, Sharon, and thanks for joining us this morning. Okay, any other willing volunteers now or do I do some cold calling? Okay, we've got Kay Man from New Inn waving at me. Morning, Bore da. Sorry, I don't know your first name.
Morning, Kerry. Sorry, I got a terrible cold.
Morning,
Kerry
Kerry.
Mann. It's term time. It always comes. Kerry Mann from Newton Primary. I'm the curriculum lead. I have been for a few years now. But as some of the our lovely colleagues have said, independent learning is on our school development plan. It was a recommendation in our last inspection. And like everybody else, we're looking for clarity, I suppose, of how to best develop these independent learners, how to improve standards, how it impacts on standards, and progression through the school as well. So really the same as everybody else, I think.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, Kerry. That's super. Okay, we'd like to go next. Oh, we got a hand up. Okay. So Wayne Vow then. I got E. Tomkinson. Sorry, I don't know your first name. Oh, no sound. Do you want to try taking your headphones out? Might be. I'll try checking your settings to make sure that they're. Ah, that's better.
Is the sound coming through?
Yes, it is now. Yeah.
Sorry. I'm Libby. I'm from Winefell Primary School, and I think one of the things we've discussed as like a leadership team is how we sort of develop our more able and talented learners to become independent, but then also with that, make sure we're supporting our low ability learners not to rely solely on adult help and having the opportunity to go off and be independent. And I think something like like Kerry said about having that progression across the school, and that sort of whole school consistent approach is something that we'd be quite interested in.
Okay. Sorry, I missed your first name. Did you say it was Emily?
Libby.
Oh, Libby. Sorry. Okay, fab. Thank you, Libby. Yeah, and I think, we'll explore again. I'll talk to you a little bit about the enablers, the role of the adult, when to intervene, when not to intervene. And we'll certainly pick up that. There's a bit of a theme emerging here around, clarity of definition, all those enablers actually that we'll pick up on around, how do you develop that progressively? So great, thanks very much for that. Okay, let's go to E. Raymond then in Plasvelin. Morning, Bore da.
Hi, yeah,
Sorry,
Bore
didn't
da.
give your name.
It's Emma.
Emma. Hi, Emma.
I think just to recap what everyone else has said, really, it was one of our recommendations from Estin as well. So just want to get clarity again, the progression through the school, being able to go to other schools for ideas is going to be great as well. So I think then on board the same reasons as everybody else, really.
Super. Okay, thank you. They're going to run out of examples now, like that. So, okay, I'm sure we're merging into the same reasons why we're here, but it's lovely to hear your voices. Okay, who have we got next then? Can I go to Court Rolling?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Bore da.
Sorry, thanks. Why don't you go
There's
first,
two
Beth?
of us. There's two of us on the call.
Two of
yeah.
us.
Oh, that's great. You brought a friend.
Oh, I
Excellent.
do. Safety in numbers. Yeah,
Oh,
Rebecca
Ed.
Gilbert. Yeah, Rebecca Gilbert, deputy head here at Court Rolling. A lot, lots of similarities to what colleagues have already referenced. But what we really want to do is drill down really into what independent learning looks like for us and our setting and our learners, and really define what those habits and behaviours and routines are going to look like that facilitate independent learning. And then obviously hand in hand with that then is looking at tools and strategies of how we help to develop those behaviours in the classroom, and create that culture, which I think somebody has already mentioned.
Lovely. Anything for you, Sian, to add to that, or is Rebecca?
Yeah, just echoing really what Rebecca said. She did very, very articulately. So yeah, I'm Sian Lennon. I'm Foundation Phase Leader in Court Rolling, and I just echo exactly what Beck said, really.
And lovely you both come together that you've been able to do that, because I think to be able to drive that forward in your school, doing it on your own sometimes is a big task, isn't it? So great that there's two of you sort of trying to you know, champion that thought. And I think some of the schools that you'll be able to visit have really thought about exactly that. You know, Rebecca, thinking about how you define it, what does it mean for you and as a school, and we'll talk about, there are some common characteristics that we need to think about when we're talking about and defining independent learning. But having that shared agreement back in your own school is so important. And then trying to think about, you know, as adults, what habits and behaviours are you going to demonstrate that you'll model to the children. I know Jane will pick a little bit about that up a little bit later on, as will Gaynor, when we talk about the roles of adults. But hopefully you'll be able to see lots of examples of when you get on your school visits as well, about how schools have started to think about that. So thanks both. Okay, cut rolling. Should we go to Brimbach then next? S. Williams, morning,
Yeah, I'm Sophie. I'm the deputy head at Brimbach. Similar as well on our SDP is independent learning, but we're particularly focusing on early years. What those children are like when they come into our school. We've found, I'm sure lots of people will say the same, but the sort of levels of independence over the last few years seem to have dropped a little bit. I think COVID may have had an impact, but we need to nail that lower down. So we've been doing a little bit of work on the 3 enablers, the developmental stages in each of our areas of provision, so what we expect to see, and things like that. But we're sort of looking at how other people are approaching it and seeing what we can, you know, add to it to make it the best it can be, really.
Excellent. I couldn't have anybody better than Gaynor on the call to help with your thinking around that. So yeah, super. Okay, thanks Sophie, that's really great. Who have we got next? And I'm going to go down my screen now. So I'm looking at Jade Jones. Is it Jonathan from St Julian's Primary?
Yeah, morning all. Yeah, so deputy head teacher, St Julian's Primary School. Just to really echo what everyone else has said as well, clarity around independence learning, and how that looks through the school, through the progression steps. So really excited. And as the others have touched on as well, I think it'll be really useful to have the opportunity to go to other schools as well to see what that looks like.
Lovely. Excellent. And I think, just to say then, I was just thinking, as Sophie was talking around, you know, you have the school visits, and part of this support is if you require any additional support, whether you go to a school and say, actually, I'd like to do a little bit more work with them, or I'd like to call upon the expertise of Gaynor or myself or Jane, whatever, you know, there's a range of opportunities for you to engage on your journey. So don't just think you can come on the PL and you can just do the visits and you're left on your own, so to speak. You know, you can call upon us to help you and continue the journey with you in terms of your development, if you just want people to sound out your approach, or if you want some additional advice and guidance. So we are there, so and can call upon the skills of the schools that you get to visit as well. Okay, shall I go to Lisa then in Lancashire? Morning Lisa, bore da.
Bore da, bow. So head teacher of Lancashire Junior School. Very much what everyone's saying on the SDP. Nobody's mentioned the E word, but obviously Estin are picking up on it, as 2 people have already said in their post recommendations. So yeah, quantifying it, and something that the gentleman from Shire Newton said about that tension between ensuring standards, because you know, with book scrutinies being such a high part of Estin's initial trawl, making sure that you know, you do get pupils that are independent but still get the standards. That really resonated. But also what Sharon said about the learned helplessness that FSM children sometimes have. That was something that struck me. I already feel that I've benefited hugely from this network, so thank you for the opportunity to be on it. And then being a single phase junior school, obviously we have this massive transition that the year 2 children make, which we've done some work to look into, you know, what our expectations are in year 3, what parental expectations are that they foist upon their children, and you know, how we can try and smooth that transition. But you know, I think we've done a lot of work towards it, but I think just focusing and being able to quantify and qualify exactly what we are doing and what we still need to do will be something that I'll find a great benefit for my practitioners. Because, you know, when they look at me and say, well, what do you mean? I go, ha ha, not sure. So thank you.
Fab, thanks Lisa. And I think you touched on the E word, and that's where we're going to start actually, because when you look at what Estin do say, it helps with that definition and defining what do we mean. That's something we did with the development group. So we're going to do that as a task with everyone this morning, just to help prompt your thinking. But you will, you know, we've got a definition we're going to share with you that we've created to try and provide that clarity, because that's where we started actually. What does it mean? What do we mean when we're talking about independent learning? So hopefully we'll explore that with you this morning and help us think more clearly about what we're talking about as a group, really. And then that helps that you're planning for improvement, doesn't it? When we're really specific about what we mean. Okay, so I'm just looking across there, see Matthew, Wayne Vow. I think I'm going to go to Sue now. I don't know, you've obviously sorted your techie issues this morning, Sue. Well done, lovely to see you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you and I can see you. Brilliant, well done.
It's the first time I've used this since coming back, so it's always a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's, you know, it's resonating with me, everything that everybody's saying. It's on our SCP. It's popping up, isn't it, in lots of inspection reports. And we just don't want to be at the back of the curve, you know. We've got lots of good practice here, particularly, I think, in foundation phase. I think the children are very well drilled in, you know, independent and choice, and the expectations there are really well embedded. But I think as they move up through the school, perhaps not so much. And again, it's that progression and independence. And what Sharon said, what struck home with me as well, is the resilience to be able to be an independent learner. And I absolutely agree that the COVID has had a massive impact, I think, particularly for us in that year 4 cohort. It just seems to, I don't know whether it just might be one of those cohorts, but I think they are really so reliant on adults to you know, to push them to do any work. That's all. No, I'm joking. No, but that's for me is the thing, is what does it look like throughout the school? I think we've had a lot of input on foundation phase, but I think progression would be brilliant.
Yeah, lovely. Okay. Well, we will start exploring that today, so that's great. Okay. A warm welcome, bore da, Claire.
Bore da. I'm Claire Howie. I'm head at, oh, my camera's off. I'm head at Ysgol Gymraeg i Foddhail in Betws in Newport. Again, I'm not going to say anything new here. For Estyn recommendation on our SDP as a result. And I think for us is that kind of clarity, well, what is it then? Because we thought you know, our children are relatively independent. You know, we've done lots of work over the years. So what is it in that definition, perhaps, that we are not doing then? A clarity, and obviously impact of COVID, maybe the shift in what independence looks like has changed. And yeah, progression across the school. So just to kind of make sure that we are on the same page as Estyn and other schools, and just to move us forward, really.
Brilliant. Thanks, Claire. Okay, I think that's probably everyone. That was really helpful. Just to get a flavour of where you are, what your focus is, what you're trying to get out of the experience. So hopefully we will be able to start you know, helping you think about some of those aspects. The school visits will be key, and we've got a lot of information to share with you today. So we hope that it doesn't feel too overwhelming, but it's more a case of starting to think and signposting you to some resources and support that can help you think about your journey at the outset. So, okay, so hopefully, she says, you got the email with a little workbook on. So if you've managed to print it off, well done. If not, then please just have it open, scribble on a bit of paper next to you. And we're going to start with a little task. So the first thing we'd like you to think about, again, to start thinking about what is independent learning. We want to ask you a question. So I'm going to give you some thinking time. When not done well, so when it's really, really bad, what does independent learning look like? So I'll give you a couple of minutes. So we'll do 5 minutes on this task. Just scribble on a bit of paper or any workbook if it's to hand. When not done well, what does independent learning look like? So, when not done well, what does independent learning look like? Would anyone like to start me off? Nick. Ooh. Hand straight up there. Come on then.
Well, I've written it. When it's worst, it's at best well-intentioned chaos, and it's at worst cynical practice. And I think we often, I've seen and done. More importantly, probably shades of the two, somewhere in between. I think you children and adults don't understand learning objectives, or they don't understand the outcomes and what people are looking for. Children
Okay.
don't necessarily get to take advantage of any cross-curricular opportunities that there might be.
Okay.
I think,
Can I stop
you
you
know,
there then a minute? Can I just
yeah.
stop you there if I can? I think you said some. So very practically, because we want to try and be precise now in terms of thinking about what are we talking about in defence. So you've talked about learning objectives, about learners not understanding the purpose of the learning,
Yeah.
and then the ability, not the inability to apply that appropriately across the curriculum. Brilliant.
Yeah.
So let's go to there. So I'd like to bring somebody else in at that point if I can. Anyone like to add to that list?
I was thinking sort of like busy tasks where they've been given, tasks that they know what they're doing, but is it just to keep them busy, or are they actually learning a skill or applying a skill that they've learned previously? It's something we've sort of noticed in our school. Are we giving them tasks to keep them busy, or are we actually giving them tasks that are going to develop them or challenge them?
And I think that's quite key. We often see I think they refer to sort of missions in some of the Estin documentation about not being challenging enough or keeping children sort of quiet or busy, but that isn't extending learning. You've all mentioned progress, didn't you, in terms of wanting to see or develop a strategy within your school that ensures pupils make progress, but then tasks that are really low level isn't necessarily extended learning, or there's been no teaching, and then they've been put in a situation where they're learning and they're not challenging their thinking and they're not moving their learning forward. Okay, great. Can we have another contribution from someone else? Just another element, Sharon?
I'm happy to go next. I've got to see things simply, because this is a massive area. It's a simple term, independent learning, but it's got loads of connotations. So I see it as the learning and the learner, even though you can't separate them, they both work together. So as for the learning, it's the metacognitive strategies. Is the children are not setting their goals, they're not understanding strategies and approaches to achieve those goals, and then when they're monitoring their progress, it tends to be done superficially. I'm done. Or they rely heavily on an adult with it. But in conjunction with that is the self-regulation, and it is the learner themselves. So have they got the self-direction? Have they got that self-motivation? Do they seek resources? And can they manage their time? And I think the crux of it all is the self-efficacy of the learner. If they haven't got the belief in themselves, there's lots of layers that need to be unpicked with that child first before you're approaching all the sort of learning stuff. That's just the way I see it.
Yeah, you covered loads there. Okay.
Sorry,
that's fine. But I think there are things that we'll pick up. Yeah, you're right that teaching, understanding themselves as a learner, and explicitly teaching some of that. Jane's going to pick that up a little bit later. And all of those skills that learners need to draw upon and then progressively use them as they go on. They start at early years, and then again they'll talk to us a little bit more about that a little bit about later. But yeah, some really valid points there. Wonderful. Okay, can I go to Brimbach? So I think that was Sophie, was it? Yeah, Sophie?
Yeah. So I was thinking about the three enablers, and first of all, I thought about the role of the adult. And I think sometimes, particularly lower down, you can either see that in the provision, maybe the adult is leaving the children to it and they are busy, but they're not necessarily nudging along their learning or listening for what they're interested in. Or on the other hand, it may be that they are sort of jumping in too often and their questions might be quite close. So I think that role of the adult is really important. And then the environment. Is your environment set up for independent learning? Is it well resourced? Is it allowing children their choice of resources and how they want to complete their task? So I was thinking about those, the role of the adult and that well resourced sort of engaging environment.
Yeah. So when it's not done well, it's, the adults aren't supporting the learning appropriately. They aren't intervening or questioning or observing. And again, I know I don't want to steal Gaynor thunder, so I'm not going to say too much about that. But, or your environment's chaotic, there isn't a progressive environment. And actually, sometimes people don't always think about the progression that's needed within your learning environment. Again, is so, so important. And that those resources, if you want independent learners to develop, can't just be in foundation learning areas, can they? It needs to be progressive throughout your school. So great, lovely points there, Sophie. Thanks very much. Lisa, Caer.
I want to go next quickly before everybody covers really good points, and I'm just left with so I just put pupils passive in their learning, waiting to be filled with facts, superficial learning, and on the flip side of that, just as Sharon said about learning and learners, teachers are not trying to create an engaging provision, and therefore they don't have that reciprocal buzz, which I think is so important to keep us motivated in such a hard job.
Yeah, I think sometimes we underestimate that, don't we? You've got to enjoy being in the classroom. You've got to enjoy children. You've got to like children, and you've got to appear to like children. And that's so, so important. Those relationships are key, aren't they? Relationships are key. So I know, again, Gaynor going to talk to us a little bit about that, but thanks. Okay. We still got things. I've still got some things on my list as well that we haven't touched yet, I think. Maybe, Claire?
I think for us is ensuring, have the children got the tools to do the independent tasks that you're setting? And it's about staff knowing the learners. I mean, I did write open facilitation, as I think it was Sophie mentioned, but it's about going, yes, you can have all the strategies, but you have to go from where your learners are with the independence. So you can, I know we've seen maybe some staff have provided lots of independent tasks, but have the children got the tools to be able to fulfill that, to move their learning forward? And you can't overcompensate for knowing your pupils, can you? So that's one of the things I noted.
And the importance of explicit teaching. Don't put them in a situation if we haven't taught them the skills that they need to access that part of whatever it is we've set up. So yeah, really good, really important. Anyone else? You've come up with a great list of what does it look like when it's not done well. So all those things you can imagine.
Just sorry, Deb, we were saying, Gemma and I, about it, when it's done badly, if you want to call it that, or not done so well, it's teacher-led. When you watch a lesson observation, some people tighten up, and then it's all directed by this teacher. There's a lot of teacher talk, and children have that opportunity to explore and make those mistakes, so they can't build that resilience to then talk about the skills of independence, because they haven't got the resilience to sort of make those mistakes. Because when it's teacher-led, everything has to be correct. There's one task. It's always like, I always say, when I walk around here, sometimes it's task and finish. And when you look at books, you feel like things are done. I know it's Stanford under pressure. I understand that the things are got to be in books, etc. But it feels like sometimes when it's done not so well to know is when it's a task and finish. So we've got to get this in books, but actually the learning is within the mistakes. And when you're looking at books and there's correct answers, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, actually, this challenge and expectation concerns you. The list goes on. We talked, lots of it has been covered. But yeah, in my mind, it's a culture in the classroom. And if it's teacher-led and teacher-directed, and I'm in charge, sort of that sort of culture, and you do what I say when I say, that sort of stifles our independence. And that's
totally. Children are making the choices. The teacher are making all the choices. I always think back in the day, where, I reflected on my own practice, where you'd have 30 children all making exactly the same Christmas card, and you'd be telling them where to stick, the Rudolph's nose and where to stick the ears, and that almost sort of task by design. You know, everyone's got to make the perfect, you know, and maybe a TA's done, you know, most of the sticking and whatever. And I think, well, actually, would if we were developing independent learning now, would that be the case? And you know, just a very simple example, and probably not a very good one, but you know, that teacher controlling everything, children are not making choices there, are they all presenting their work in a way that they want to, you know, so you can look at across the class where everyone's engaged in the same learning, but it's presented in a variety of different ways. So yeah, I think really valid points there, Matthew. Thanks very much. Sue?
I bet you had lovely Christmas cards, so.
No, I was never very creative, so they probably weren't, to be honest.
I'm only joking. I haven't got a creative bone in my body. Anyway, what I was saying, Matthew absolutely hit the nail on the head there, but also you can tell who the confident, strong teachers are, and perhaps the less experienced teachers may be needing that control, because like you said, they're not afraid to see the work in progress in the books. They're not afraid to see those mistakes. They're not afraid to give the children the strategies to be able to choose for themselves the way they present their work and things like that. So if you are doing a learning walk, you know the classes who have had lots of experience of having choice over their learning, and because they can handle it better, can't they? Their books might have things that are not absolutely, you know, as perfect as perhaps some teachers would like them to see them. But in a learning walk, you can see the classrooms that have had lots of experiences of independent work, and the teacher has spent the time to unpick the strategies to enable them to do work of a high enough standard. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's not just the low level tasks. So yeah,
I think the challenge and expectation issue will become apparent. We'll pick that up a little bit later, and you will see that through the inspection task. You know, it's not just about keeping them quiet and busy. I think was one word we heard describe it earlier. It's about challenging their thinking, deepening their learning, deepening their thinking. You know, having those resilience, you know, strategies, as somebody mentioned earlier. So, okay, is there anyone else like to add that? I think we've had some fantastic responses there. Really great, because we're going to pick that up a little bit now when we start sharing our definitions. So, okay, I'm going to whiz through this next bit now because whiz through, because we've had some great discussion there. So, next bit then is all about the E word, as someone said earlier. It is about inspection. So I'm just going to highlight a few important key messages that have come out over the last academic year, so 22-23, just for us to start thinking about, you know, what is it in terms of the precise nature of ESTIN, and when they're referring to independent, what sorts of things are they talking about? So the annual report from Chief Inspector talk more broadly about, you know, the quality of teaching, and actually, which is a point I made earlier, when we're talking about independent learning, it is intrinsically part of your whole school approach to the quality of teaching, and an assessment and curriculum and all that, and we'll talk a bit about that. So it's not a bolt-on, it's not something separate, it is integral to all of that, and that starts with good old self-evaluation. And I think there's been a period of time where perhaps, you know, we've all talked about improvement planning, and the inspection doesn't start with a self-evaluation report, but you do need to know your school well, and understanding what elements of teaching are going well and what needs to be improved is all part of the independent learning piece. And on this quote, it talks about necessarily focusing on the what we teach, so that overemphasis, and rightly so, at a period of time we focused on the curriculum, right, to new curriculum approaches, our curriculum design, and so on and so forth, and maybe we'd lost our way in terms of thinking about how the curriculum provision and teaching assessment go hand in hand. So that's what they've challenged us about. In terms of some key messages around teaching, it talked about when it was going well, people had prioritised improving the quality of teaching alongside planning the curriculum. So as you just mentioned, leaders purposely focused professional learning. So the professional learning was focused and very precisely on aspects of teaching, or maybe if we're thinking about independent learning, thinking about, actually, we've identified the learning environment as an issue for us, we need to focus our professional learning across the whole school if that's an issue. So being very precise around that, thinking about where things were less effective in improving learning, we focus too much on developing the content and not necessarily having that balance between the teaching elements, and then focusing too heavily on what they teach and not providing enough time and reflection around professional learning to think how best to teach different aspects of the curriculum. But not you guys, because you've all turned up. You are doing that just by coming today and prioritising professional learning around this area. So what are they saying about independence? So in the annual report, where it was being developed effectively, they were thinking about the intended learning. So I think it was Nick's point straight in there around being clear about what the learning is supposed to be focused on. When it's good, they're planning those learning experiences and building beneficially on one another. So that's part of your curriculum provision, isn't it? Understanding progression and thinking about those small steps that are needed and to be planned. And then thinking about the application of those things independently in sometimes new and more challenging situations. So that goes back to high expectations, and that, we don't want busyness, do we? We want them to be thinking about new, challenging situations. In a few cases, foundation learning practice is rolled out into upper primary and beyond. And sometimes there's not a strong enough understanding of how this practice can support older pupils. And it's something that Gainer's going to pick up. And then there's lack of challenge or support, and does little to further pupils' learning, and therefore pupils aren't making appropriate progress. Okay. Then we've got a situation then at the bottom where people talk about teachers focus too much on what pupils said they wanted to learn and didn't consider whether this was appropriate and how it fitted into pupils' learning journey. So there's lots of things there for us to start thinking, and they're being a little bit more specific around challenge, about the progress, and understanding how learners influence what they learn. And I think that's a big part of independent learning, not just having a free-for-all, making choices within a clear strategy that teachers lead and direct. Okay, so we've got lots of sector summaries that give us some snippets around independent learning. I'm not going to spend too much on these, but basically, the earlier, the younger the child, the less independent learning is an issue. And as you see children move through the system, independent learning becomes more and more of an issue. So, sorry, let me just move that on there. So you'll see some mention there about independence. Out of 92 inspections back last year, only 12 had a recommendation. But then you start to see a growing picture where either schools are talking about independent learning, or Eston are talking about the ability for pupils to talk about their own learning, about understanding their own progress. And you'll see a growing number there of schools where there's maybe low expectation. They may not use the word independent learning, but again, these are all linked to the quality of teaching. So you'll see across all sectors, there's elements of independent learning. So the quality of feedback, so pupils aren't able to understand what their strengths and development areas are. They can't talk about what they need to do next or how to improve their work. Again, same for special schools. Some of our schools across the region have had recommendations around some of these. So these are some of the examples of recommendations: the strength and opportunities to develop as independent learners, improve opportunities to develop their independence and effectiveness as learners. So there's a reference there, a loose reference maybe to the principles of progression, improve deeper understanding and extend those opportunities. So some of the examples of what we've seen over the last year coming through. And what you can see over the next couple of slides are really just some of the recommendations. So biggest area of focus is self-evaluation. So understanding what's good about your independent learning and what's not. The quality of teaching, which is intrinsically linked, but you also see independent learning quite high up in terms of the recommendations, as lots of you've all alluded to. And some of the schools that you'll be able to visit, I've either had an Eston visit and they've been part of the post-inspection action plan, and they've worked really quite rapidly to try and address some of those issues that they're happy to share with you. And I think that's really, really important. Okay, so at that point then, I'm just going to hand over to Jane, because I think we're going to go into a quick task. At that moment, I'm just going to switch my camera off and time for a new voice. So over to you, Jane.
Thanks, Deb. We are going to do a short task, about 10 minutes. Deb sent through to you via email a workbook, and in the workbook, there are some extracts from recent Eston inspection reports. And we'd like you to take some time, maybe 10 minutes or so, to read through these extracts with these questions in mind and just make a few notes. Do any of the comments surprise you? Does any of this reflect practice within your own school? What questions or observations do you have after reading the extracts? So if anyone doesn't have that email, can you just pop your name in the chat and we'll send that through to you. But if we could just take 10 minutes and then we'll come back together and do a little bit of feedback over the kinds of things that have struck you from reading through those extracts from the inspection reports. Okay, thanks everyone. Lisa, I saw your hand going straight up there.
Very much like the from Shire Newton. Well, I haven't had a chance to read the last 4 in depth, but my first observation was you have the 3 that are obviously the creme de la creme of independent learners, and please can we visit those schools? So the first one I've just written wow, where they've got that radio reach, you know, they've clearly got it. And then the second really positive one, where it says pupils develop creatively as independent learners, teachers have a secure understanding of child development. It didn't surprise me that I went on to read that it was clearly an early years setting that was that, but I thought that that was key. And I've written there, school has worked hard to have a skillful staff team. So, you know, we've talked about the fact that, yes, you can allow your children to go, but you need to know that they've got the skills to be able to go, and that your staff are able, you know, the enabling adults and all of that. And the third really positive one there, I've written, they've got a very flexible, reactive approach to planning. So, you know, I'm sure you already have planned for us to go to those schools, but that really struck me as, you know, wow, I'd love that to have been written about my school.
Thank you. It's really interesting, isn't it, that they are really strong, those first 3. There's a lot of various approaches as well. They're not necessarily the same things that they're seeing in the 3 schools. So it is interesting. Thank you for that. Did you see anything that made you think, oh, that surprises me?
Well, yeah, they were. I hate to say this, but having been on several Eston inspections as a peer inspector, what came across was it very much is up to the skill of the report writing to be able to, you know, make it clear what Eston actually want. There was one. It was on the next page, the flip of those positives. The second one, it says in all classes, pupils demonstrate strong attitudes towards their learning. And I thought when I read the rest about how they listen carefully, they line up nicely, I just thought, well, I don't understand how the children are showing strong attitudes when, you know, it's not until the final sentence, the however statement, that says that they lack confidence and resilience. And I thought, well, I know, because they've been practicing lining up and being diligent all that time. So that one really surprised me. And as I say, being a cynical old head teacher now, I just thought, well, it's really helpful when Eston are explicit in their language so that we know why we are good at something or why we are not good at something. But I also respect that Eston have to look after our well-being at the same time.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Really thoughtful. Okay, has anyone else got any comments after that? Anything else that really jumped out? Oh, we got Nick, I think you're next.
Yeah, no surprises really, Jane. I think if I were to read these through, I know where I'd want to go. I'd know where I'd want to go and see. As I was reading through it, it's clear it's about the balance of priorities, isn't it? And how leaders in the school and staff in the school have focused on like in the previous slide that Deb talked through, they focused on curriculum and pedagogy at the same time, because you can't have one without the other. It kind of brought to mind the circle of security, the two hands approach. We've got curriculum on one hand and you've got pedagogy in the other, and you can't have successful children without that two-handed approach. I don't know about Lisa said, the lady from Lancashire. I do think there's a place for that training of children to listen, and I do think there's a place for the children, training of children to make their way about schools and classrooms in the right way, because I think otherwise those really important parts do help to develop children that can work independently, and do help to develop those kind of learner capacities and learner behaviors that we need. I think is a big part of self-control. Yeah, so those are my thoughts.
Routines and expectations help to develop self-regulation as well, don't they?
Absolutely.
And we know that's quite an important part of it. And I think it's interesting, we will keep coming back to this, the importance of where independent learning fits in your pedagogical approaches, where it sits in your teaching and learning strategy as a school, and maybe wider as a cluster, as Deb alluded to. I feel like I am the only secondary practitioner on the call at the moment, but we are thinking about this in terms of the 3 to 16 progression, and it's not going to steal Gainer's thunder when I talk about the 3 enablers have, over the last 2 years really for us, been really important in spreading that message that those core things are crucial in secondary as well as primary, and it is that developmental approach to independent learning. If you think at age 16, children have to manage their own learning in exams and demonstrate how they've learnt, that getting them there with metacognition and self-regulation is really important, and that forming part of our teaching and learning strategy is really important across the age ranges. So pedagogy, Nick, absolutely, it does sit in there. I think it's Sue, is it? Yes.
Yes, Sue. Hi. Yeah, absolutely. But what really came across for me is that like you said, it's developing those scaffolds and then taking them away, isn't it, at an appropriate stage in their development. And so, lining up is important, and then obviously, hopefully, they'll carry on with that for the rest of their school career. But what I like to see was the fact that the mention of pride, and that's an important school value, isn't it? The culture of the school being proud of their work. Children never want to show you work, like you said, of their card that all the rest of the children in the class got the same looking card with Rudolph in the right place, nose in the right place, and things like that. They want to show you some bit of paper that they've scrumpled up in the corner, and they are thrilled to bits with it because they've done it all themselves. But that pride, is developing that pride in their work, isn't it? It's a school culture, and they're proud of the work that they've done themselves. Children are far more proud of things they've done on their own, aren't they? To a good standard.
I think you're absolutely right there, and culture and ethos really does come into this from very early on. And again, that is linked to your routines and your expectations to a certain extent, but it's about aspiration as well, isn't it? And the ethos that you build in the school around independent learning and the celebration of independent learning as well. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you very much. I'm very conscious of time. Was there anybody else that wanted to give any feedback at this point? Okay, I'm going to take that as a not at the moment, and I'm going to hand back. Oh, actually, I think I'm handing over to Gaynor now, is it? Is it Deb or Gaynor?
I think so.
Gaynor?
Show me the next slide.
Think it's you, Gaynor.
Yes. Well, I just want to explain that this is a definition that was pulled together by the groups of schools who worked and shared their approaches to independent learning. So it's nothing that you're going to find in a book for a start, but it is a start for us to think about whether you agree with the statements that they've put here.
Pupils take ownership of their learning by using their skills and knowledge acquired to facilitate learning experiences by themselves or within a group. So independent learning, number one, doesn't mean working on your own. It is how you work with others as well. Independent learning can be influenced by pupil interest, can be. Engaging in experiences and appropriate expectation and challenge. It can be that. It can also be directed by the teacher, introduced by the teacher. So we're not saying that everything in terms of independent learning either comes from the child's interest or from an adult directed approach. Obviously, from what you said this morning, the most important thing is how appropriate feedback is to children in terms of their independence and how quickly that happens, if it happens on the spot, or if the feedback that's given is relevant to the child's learning needs at the time. And that's a skill in and of itself, isn't it? It's crucial for children to access enabling adults, to have enabling adults, I think. And we're going to talk now about, what does an enabling adult look like and sound like. I quite like the fact that already this morning you've described what some of them don't sound like, or what we don't want them to sound like, but they do. They do. They jump in too quickly. They stand back too long. They do everything for the children, thinking they're helping, those sorts of things. And we're going to talk a bit about effective environments and those engaging experiences and who are they engaging for. So it should always be in the service of the child, knowing about child development and what they're interested in. So if we want to start with independent learning, I'm here basically to bang the drum I always drum, which is early years is different and it should be seen as different within your school context. So nursery and reception, oh, thank you. Practice and provision has to be different. So if we want to develop independent learners, the vehicle for that kind of learning is play. It's children's biological drive for learning, right from when they're born. They want to explore the world around them. They want to explore what they can do with their own bodies, but also with materials around them, and then the natural environment too. They're born investigators. They're born explorers. So if we're not using that vehicle of play and valuing play, and there's a lot to be discussed in terms of the play that's self-directed, play that children want to do and are driven to do. So that's going to involve schematic play. We haven't got time to go into that now. It is going to involve children wanting to be physical and be outside and explore what their bodies can do. And actually, if we're allowing them to do those things in terms of physicality, actually, we're building up their ability to make decisions, make choices, build up resilience, problem solve. All the things that we would write down to say, this is what an independent learner will look like, starts in play. But we've got to be sure that the play that we're offering the children is the play that they need. So again, I think sometimes what happens is adults plan play activities. They plan play activities that have learning objectives in mind. And I know you've mentioned learning objectives and how important they are. They're important to be in the adult's head. In the adult's head, 3, 4 and 5-year-olds, not necessary to be written down somewhere. Also, sometimes with learning objectives, they can be quite capping of learning. They don't allow the child to experiment and show you what they can do. So I'm just going to talk through the 6 photographs really, really quickly. I'm looking at time going, blimey. We've covered a lot this morning, but there's an awful lot more to go. So around this time of year, if children are not outside playing and engaging with nature, there's something wrong, I would say. So if we think about a pumpkin, the wealth of learning that's going to come from pumpkins is going to be enormous. Whether we're linking it to literacy, or we're linking it to numeracy, or we're linking it to creativity, or we're linking it to physical development, we can do all of it by investigating pumpkins. And we'll plan some of those activities, obviously, but we'll also want to listen to and notice what the children are saying and doing and bringing to the table about pumpkins? What do they already know? Some of them now, for example, probably do go to pumpkin farms and pick their own pumpkin. Not all of them. And if they don't have that experience, is that something we can give them? So for the children that Sharon mentioned, who are from low EFSM backgrounds, you know, some of that will be the richness of their pre-learning opportunities is not there. So we need to give it to them. And if I go back to the play, some of those children with parents with the very best of intentions have probably bought them a lot of digital resources and equipment, thinking that's the thing that they need. Actually, what they needed was time with mum and dad and aunties and uncles and brothers and sisters playing, really playing, with lots of loose parts, basically, that you can do anything with. The middle picture is a reception class where the children have been engaged in block play for well over 6 weeks. Same block play, but kept on building and building and building and changing and adapting. So I'm thinking about the independence, I'm thinking about the problem solving, I'm thinking about the cooperation, I'm thinking about the collaboration. And then they decided that they wanted to write about their block play. It turned into like a kind of Power Rangers kind of play. So they were talking about then their Power Rangers. They wanted to do the writing. At this point, I am not looking to see that the spelling is correct. I'm just really, really happy that the children want to write and tell us about what they built and what's happening in there. Lots of schools, third photograph, lots of schools now are developing independence, resilience, confidence, competence, curiosity, creativity, language, mathematical skills. I could go on and on and on and on and on and on by introducing woodwork. So we've got 3-year-olds who are developing woodworking skills. So if we're thinking about, it starts in nursery reception, why on earth can't that carry on all the way through the school? And as they carry on, children revisit their skills in terms of woodwork, but also they develop more skills. They apply their numeracy skills, working out angles, measuring accurately. Maybe some of the woodwork becomes something that they can hang up and use for a creative task. It doesn't matter, but you can build on it. The little bit of the photograph at the bottom is engaging with nature. So this is a nursery class, long donkey's years ago, that photograph, to be honest with you, but it's still a good one. So the children grew their own vegetables. Again, if we're wanting children to develop independence and thinking about their physical skills and their ability to notice and wait and tend to and look after and then reap the rewards of their learning and their efforts, then growing is a really good way to build up those skills and knowledge. So here we've got the lovely broad beans. We could have just brought the broad beans in, let the children have a look at them and just pop them on the table. But now it's become a planned activity to think about and talk about numbers, also length. So there's lots of opportunities to use what you've grown, bring it back into the classroom. So better to have things that we grow outside and we bring back in than we have inside and take out. So I think if I said anything to you about early learning in particular, but also I think later on, is count up the number of worksheets you have in your books. Because oftentimes worksheets are the ones that are given for busy tasks. They're not developing independence, in my opinion. So have a look at how many of these activities, you would not necessarily see any of this in a book, but the learning is within the child, and you'll see it in the way the child is and behaves and is becoming in terms of their independence. Effective environments are enormously important. And part of that, some of you, I'm sorry, I wrote your names down, but I couldn't now go back to my notes and notice who said it. But setting up the environment so children can select and return resources is really important. And I think we do that really, really well in foundation learning, as it's called now, the period 3 to 7. I see most classes have well-resourced and well set up areas of provision where children can see what they need to do in that area and also have the resources to use readily at hand. But also, if they want to take the resources into a particular area, that's also allowed. You know, they can move the pens into the block area because they want to use the post-its to make notices for their whatever they've created. What I tend not to see so much as the children get older is children accessing provision independently. There seems to be a lot more of teachers putting things out for the children, or all the children doing the same thing at the same time. So having a look at how your classes are organised and arranged, can you see the progression all the way from, if you've got a nursery class, nursery up to year 6, it will change, obviously. Class sizes are different, table sizes are different. Let's talk about how many tables are in the classroom and what would happen if you took a few away. And maybe had bigger areas of provision where children could stand, sit, kneel. Not everything has to be done on a table with 6, 8 chairs around it. My last one, I think most people are aware of block play, but block play is definitely something for those schools who have taken it on and seen the value of it, is something that can go from nursery all the way up to year 6. And where it's done well, there is so much independent learning going on, and problem solving and creativity, as I say. So those are just some examples of what provision can and should look like in order to develop those independent learners. So I just want to make sure, I'm looking at my notes now to make sure I've said all that I wanted to say. I haven't said the things I do need to say, which is, actually, can I skip to the next slide? Because it comes to the first point about the enabling adults. So it sounds like everybody's read enabling learning guidance. Is that correct? Yes?
Yeah.
Hope so. I can see some nods. Thank you. Where enabling learning guidance is used well, again, I'll say that head teachers, senior leaders are using it to monitor teaching and learning. So they take it all the way from nursery up to year 6 and look at how the adults are developing relationships, first and foremost, with children, that they do know about child development and what's appropriate, that they do know how to intervene, when to intervene, and help learners to develop vocabulary through genuine conversations. Being interested, I think we said that earlier on. You know, if you're not interested in children, it's going to be really difficult for you to have an authentic conversation with a child that's talking about their learning and what they might be interested in. Enabling adults have to, particularly in early years, use their powers of observation. So if your staff haven't had any professional learning on observation and how to observe and how their observations feed into their planning, then that would be something. If I was thinking about how do I support my teachers, TAs to become more effective enabling adults, I'd always start with observation and understanding child development. Because there was one of the quotes that you saw, there was a quote about knowing how to follow children's interests, and it isn't asking, not always asking children what they want to learn. I think probably that's been a rabbit hole that many have gone down. Well, we asked the children what they wanted to learn, they said they wanted to do this, and we went with them, and it kind of died a death, and we wish we'd never done it, and blah, 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 blah. So oftentimes for young children, what they want to learn comes from you observing what they're doing, not what they're saying, where they're playing, what they're playing with, and how they're playing. And I think, again, for the enabling adults, we observe the children in your environments, indoors and out, but then you look at your experiences on offer within your environments to say, are they engaging? So as SLT, how do you know the experiences on offer are engaging? Because that leads to independence. If children are engaged in an activity, they're going to be able to do it in a more engaged way because of the fact they are interested in it. So I would be looking at those sorts of things. I'm hoping that you've read these 3 enablers. They are really, really good. Obviously going to say that. But just to get you to sort of reconceptualize what a classroom a setup might look like as you move through the school. So rather than thinking about what somebody mentioned transition, I'm sorry, was it Lisa? Was it Lisa? Lisa, you mentioned transition. So it would be interesting to think about, is it about children being ready for juniors, year 3, or is it about year 3 being ready to accept these learners and the way in which they've been learning? And if it's been effective, why aren't we carrying that on? Why aren't we carrying this approach on? So that there's not such a big difference, transition in terms of their expectations of what they can do. I think, just looking at the time, so sorry. Yes, okay, right, thank you. Thank you, Deb. I'll stop talking, but I'm happy to take comments. And I'm just wondering, some questions here for you, but we'll be ever so quick. You know, if you've used enabling learning in school, how did you use it? What for you is a strength in your school currently? And how do you know? Can you say that for all classes, or is it just some classes? So if it's just some classes, how are you going to use those classes to support others? And what do you think you might need to work on? I know we've kind of said that maybe in the beginning though, so it might be that from what we've had already this morning, you might be saying, actually, my first step might be, we're going to look at environments from nursery and or reception, depending on the school, or year 3, Lisa, or year 3. We're going to look at the environments. We're going to look at how we're enabling the children to be independent within their choices, within their ways of working, ways of presenting their work, within their ability to work on mini projects of interest to them, within the way that we plan, so that we are not planning a topic that has no relevance to the children's authentic experiences and interests, and that we don't take notice of whether the topic is actually engaging the children. We planned it, we're doing it. Come hell or high water, we're doing it, that kind of thing. So the responsive kind of planning. Or it could be on, I think we need to work on our observation skills and move from there. But I'm just going to go back to my first point really, which is, I think if you want to enable, independent learners in your schools, you have to have I was going to say a naughty word then, so I can't say that word. You have to have the confidence. You have to have the confidence to allow them to play in the early years for extended periods of time. And you have to also, oh dear, somebody said doesn't sound well. Also in that play, you have to really have a look at, is it the self-directed play that I was talking about, that the curriculum for funded non-maintained talks about, or is it adult directed play where they're still being told where they go and how long they can go on the tough spot for, or in the role play, or out in the garden, whatever it is. So just, yeah, I'm only going to give you 3 minutes because we're literally, look at the time, it's 25 to 12. Wow.
How are you? You okay?
I'm good, thank you, Andrea.
Yeah, what really resonated with me, it is that last bit you said about having the confidence to allow the learners to play for extended periods of times. I'll be honest, sometimes as leadership, you feel those accountability measures, you worry about, you know, what people are going to think if they're like those, you know, and teachers themselves think, oh, they're just playing. But I think it's about getting that play right, like you said, which I think is something where we're at the moment. We want to really make sure the play that we're giving, is it adult directed? Is it the play that the adult thinks the child should be having, or is it the play that the child needs? So I'd say as a school, that's where we're at the moment, especially within our early years, making sure we get that balance right, and place that importance on using play as a vehicle to enable independence. But I also like what you're talking about, looking at the enabling environments and taking that all the way through the school. We started to work on that, but how do our parents progressively enable learners, you know? And I think you're right, sometimes we go from those classrooms that are organised with all the areas. Now we've got a beautiful school, but they're quite small classrooms in Key Stage 2. And they don't have the areas, and I think maybe they lose their independence a bit then, because teachers do put the pots on the table with the things already for them, rather than children having to access them freely and make their choices. So some really good things to think about there. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Andrea. Phew. Anyone else?
I was just going to say, for us, where we've been working on the early years, we were looking at enabling adults. We were looking at how our adults could be used more effectively in our environment. And I think we'd almost gone a step too far, and we had to move back and think about our actual environment, and even just the structure and the set out and the best use of space. I think what worked potentially for a cohort last year, these children don't have the same interests, so it's about adapting it for the cohort of children that you've got. Even thinking about, actually, is that area of provision best suited next to that one, because this one is making a lot of noise, this one they want, you know, a little bit more quiet. So we sort of went back to the drawing board and have sort of rejigged it across our nursery and reception based on the children's interest before we move to that next step then of what we expect to see in the provision, the resources, and then that enabling adults. So yeah, we sort of had to go back before we went forward.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Thank you. Nick? Oh no. Oh yes, Nick first, because Jane's got her hand up, but I'll let you go first, Nick.
Thank you, Gaynor. I was struck by I mean, clearly I'm not a foundation phase practitioner. I am definitely 5-6 in my comfort zone there. So, but I was struck by and I can't believe I haven't thought it through in this way, but following what they're doing, not what they're saying.
Yeah.
And the opportunities are clearly there for the foundation learning phase of our school. Much more so, I think it's probably easier to follow what children are doing in those areas. I think that's going to be something that, you know, if it is to be developed further on down the line in our school, how do we follow what children are doing in a context where they're older? Can we do that? Is that something to be investigated? I like the idea of it, but how and what?
I think, like, if we take that to and pick it a little bit, I mean, if we're observing what they're doing as they're older, again, we're going to be looking at their levels of engagement and their enthusiasm for the task, and they're thinking outside of that task and linking up their learning a little bit more. So they will be doing, but yours will be articulating more because they can. Yeah. Jane.
So it won't surprise. Oh, I'll go last, Gaynor. How's that?
Okay. Claire.
Hi. It was just striking me when I was reflecting on what we've done with kind of enabling learning. We've looked at the document, you know, several years ago now when it first came out, and did some staff training, but it's kind of keeping that on the boil, because the amount of staff turnover, keeping that, particularly with TAs, that's a challenge for us at the moment. And obviously with the environment, we so need and want to develop our outdoor, but we're having terrible trouble with intruders at the moment, and everything we develop gets ripped up. So it's about that balance of how we can, you know, all the external factors that are affecting. And so we need to find a way of kind of keeping all this thing, the external things, not affecting what we're doing on our journey, really. We've started, you know, we've gone back to the document for the curriculum for non-maintained settings, and we've looked at the reflective questions in there as a base point. You know, not saying, right, we need to change everything, but, you know, what are we doing really well? And that has to come from the practitioners themselves as well, not from senior leadership saying, right, this is what we're going to do. Because you've got to have that buy-in of you, and sort of, particularly, as I said, with Estin, giving it as recommendation further up. Just like get everybody on the same page, thinking and making sure we're all, it's that shared understanding of what it looks like for us with all these external factors.
I'm glad you mentioned the curriculum for funded non-maintained nursery settings, even though it takes 5 minutes to say. Such a long sentence title. But the developmental pathways in that curriculum, from the left to the right, it says, I need to. And it was written that way so that practitioners, anyone reading it, would understand that children have these biological and social drives. And it's something that we shouldn't ignore. So when reading the curriculum, be mindful of the fact those are biological social drives. This is what children from birth are born to do and want to do. The middle bit is about what you might observe in their learning. So I'm learning to whatever it is, in physical development, in well-being, in communication, in exploration, lots of maths is in the exploration developmental pathway. And then the final section is my learning is enhanced by, and learning, independent learning as well, incorporated, is enhanced by the physical and emotional environment, adults and the environment, engaging experiences, so those experiences we've just been talking about in terms of how are they engaging learners in wanting to know more and demonstrate what they do know, and then the environment that supports them to be independent, but also to collaborate and to cooperate and do all of those things. And I get the point about lining up, but if lining up is taking up a half an hour of every day, that's 2 hours of learning. I'm just going to leave that one there because it is important, but how many times they have to line up, particularly in early years when they're transitioning from here to here to here to here, that sometimes breaks up the play. Stopping talking right now, off. Sorry.
We should have planned more than a 2-hour session is my reflection at this point. Anyway, thanks, Gaynor. Loads to think about there. And whilst, you know, we're talking about our youngest pupils, we know that lots of that is relevant as they start progressing. So I am going to whiz through now and probably do what I shouldn't be doing and get through some of this information, but we're happy to pick up any conversations individually. We'll just try and give you some highlights. We might skip over 1 or 2 activities. We'll see how we get through. But just to walk you through some messages that might help you now in your next phase of development. The first of which, you know, building all of that rich conversation we've just had with Gaynor, is just around the importance of evaluating your provision. And that goes back to the key messages around the quality of self-evaluation nationally. And it's a big issue. So most of you, I think, have talked about it's a priority on your improvement plan. So thinking about how you can be really precise and thinking about all those elements that we've talked about the role of your adults, around your planned experiences, around how you use assessment approaches to communicate and support pupils to talk about what they themselves as learners, about what they're learning to do, about the choices they make, about what they need to do to improve, because all of these things are all those characteristics of assessment, of independent learning, and part of your broader teaching and learning strategy. So just a few things really quickly, just to point in your direction. So in terms of teaching and learning, hopefully you all had the version that was draft last year. There are elements of teaching and learning that will help you support and have that forensic look at independent learning. Okay, the new guidance document has been updated. I've put it in the team view. There are EAS versions, but there are also versions that are exactly the same currently, and one for each local authority. So if you're looking at them, if you want the Monmouthshire version of this document, there's one of those, and so on and so forth for each LA. Everything we've said and talked about this morning is intrinsically linked to that whole school approach. And we've talked about, you know, learners being independent and what does that look like? And actually, we've talked about the role of teaching and assessment. So within that, being clear about what the intended learning is, talking about differentiation, all those different groups of learners, the expectation, the role of assessment and feedback, questioning, when to intervene. So can you see all of these elements are so intrinsically linked to your overall approach to teaching and learning, but it feels like it's being called something else. But actually, lots of these elements are good teaching and learning, aren't they, when we're referring to independent learning? So we just wanted to make that point. And we did a piece of work for Newport Local Authority. So if you're from Newport, you'll know last term you had a thematic around independent learning. And we started and supported SIPs and head teachers to start refining and reflecting against their independent learning. We looked at the teaching and learning guidance, and these were the elements that we focused on. Okay, so the clarity in learning, attitudes to learning and wellbeing, lesson structure, the learning environment, the role of the adult, planning for that progression, and the role leaders have, so the role you have in leading that expectation about how do you plan and communicate those expectations for independent learning. It came with a bit of a health warning, because really lots of those things that we're talking about are actually in essence the principles of progression, and they touch on lots of elements of your teaching and learning approaches. But we decided to try and keep it very succinctly. But what we're saying is it is about the principles of progression. They are intrinsically linked to those principles of progression. Talk about lots of the things around increasing your effectiveness as a learner. That is about, you know, being independent, isn't it? That is about deepening their knowledge, having those times and experiences, just as Gaynor alluded to. So the next couple of slides, these are just some extracts so you know where they came from, but it's all within the booklet in the team. What we suggest, if you haven't yet had a forensic look at independent, maybe following today's opportunities, maybe go back and have another look at independent learning, about following the reflections you've had today. Engage in a learning observation around your school. Use that guidance to sharpen your thinking about where you may be, and what things you might like to consider when you go and visit other schools. So actually, if you go now back round as a learning walk and looking at provision, you might think, actually, are my adults really enabling learning, or are they intervening, you know, too soon? Do we need to do some professional learning? So think about all those things that we talked about, and maybe if you feel that would be beneficial, engaging in that before you start your school visits. Just as an aside, and just to flag it up, it isn't specifically related to independent learning, but there is new self-evaluation guidance. So when you're evaluating your provision, there's some new guidance documents, and I pop those in the team for you as well. They are going to go on the SOS website, and we've been running some professional learning separately just on this, and there's another cohort in spring term, but it sort of fits in with that, with everything that we've talked about really in the big picture scheme of things. So Jane's going to take us now very quickly through the next, just to signpost you, so we'll try and get to the end, Jane, if we can, but I know there's some key messages that it's important that you get to share, so back to you.
Thank you. It will be a whistle-stop tour because I am conscious of time. I'm just going to say now there are a number of videos in this section which we're not going to play now because we don't have time for, but Deb will share this slide deck with you in the file section of our team space, and you'll be able to access those videos and take a little look at them, if that's okay. So first port of call really is, as Deb explained to you, you're going to have the opportunity to visit quite a wide range of schools who are at differing stages, I guess, in terms of developing their independent learning. Many of them have really strong practice. Some of them have, at the request of Estin, worked on their independent learning and have made really strong progress over a short period of time. So the idea behind this, and Deb shared with you the links earlier on in the slide deck, is for you to go out and see some experience some of the independent learning that is available across the region for you to look at. As you can see on there are really quite a strong range there. We've got schools that have gone through Estin inspection and have been highlighted as having good practice. We've got schools for whom independent learning was a recommendation and who have then engaged in research and developed a whole school strategy. So I'm looking at Ysgol Panteg in Torfaen for that. Obviously, for Welsh medium schools, that is available to be seen dual lingually. We've got a secondary school there, and I would highlight the opportunity of this. I want to just go back a little bit to some of the things that Gaynor said. If your feeder school for secondary is not aware of enabling adults engaging experiences in effective environments, those are 3 sets of words to share with them, because as our definition earlier on shows, it's applicable across the age range. And independent learning doesn't stop in year 6, it continues quite significantly, and it's the building blocks that take place in the early years, as Gaynor said, that are built on all the way through. Our curriculum is progressive 3 to 16, and our independent learning needs to be progressive 3 to 16 as well. So Lewis Girls offer some quite innovative strategies in terms of independent learning in a secondary. If it is something that you wish to think about in terms of cluster development, that might be somewhere to go and have a look. But we've also got a really nice range there of schools demonstrating block play, as in Pentre Poeth, which, as Gaynor said, and I'm a convert to this, having not taught in any primary schools, but the effectiveness of block play all the way through to year 6 is incredible to see in terms of developing independent learning. So have a little look at what's there. The links are there for you to book onto as many as you want. If you have the time to go to all 7, please do. I doubt that that is at all reasonable, but maybe pick 2 or 3 that you'd like to go to and have a little look and see what's there. Thanks, Deb. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so it won't surprise you to know that we would recommend some of the EEF documentation. There is a really good guidance document on metacognition and self-regulated learning. There are 7 strong recommendations there. The full guidance is available via that link. It is extensive, and really there's a video that should be on the next slide, but we won't look at it now. So there's a 6-minute video which talks through metacognition and self-regulation and where that sits in for independent learning. We know it's crucial. I know colleagues talked about the importance of metacognition. I think, Sharon, you mentioned it. It is crucial as part of how we look at problem solving, how we look at self-regulation. So please use these documents and this video either to inform yourselves, or also it's useful to share with colleagues. The video is a really strong part of that. So if we skip over that, so many of you will be familiar with the Supporting Vulnerable Learners Through Effective Teaching and Learning website. This is a free resource. We've already looked at how this sort of fits in to wider teaching and learning, but within this resource there are a couple of really important modules that you may wish to consider. So Deb, if we can just go on to the next slide. All you need, if you aren't familiar, all you need is your hub login, and anybody with a hub login can access these materials. And for those of you who have high numbers of free school meal learners, there's a particular lens on disadvantaged and vulnerable, but as you'll see in the box, there are 2 modules here which will be really beneficial for us, one on metacognition and one on independent learning. So the 10 key pedagogical approaches that are linked here come from the EEF Teaching and Learning Toolkit. And we're focusing really on the independent learning strategies and metacognition. So if we move on to the next slide. Each module is made up of a number of videos and workbooks to work through. Everything is downloadable. If we move on to the next slide, there are further videos that you can watch around why learners are not independent already, what are the barriers to independent learning, and there are further 3 resources here that can support you. You can use this either as a whole school professional learning session, or you can use it as individuals, and you can direct people with a particular interest in developing independent learning in their classroom or metacognition to these as resources, and they stand alone. You can just work through them at your own pace. Very conscious we've only got 4 minutes, so I'm sorry I'm rushing through these, but Deb, and this is something that we produced with the working party. This sort of gives you a summary and almost a sort of roadmap to work through that you could share with colleagues. You can use it. There's, again, they talked about the reflective questions, and we took those and started to get, as a starting point, things you might want to be thinking about, and then working your way through looking at how experiences are engaging, environments are effective, adults enable, how learners employ metacognitive strategies to manage and organise their own learning, repeating those metacognitive strategies progressively through your school and beyond. Talking about emotional regulation, self-motivation and self-regulation, proactivity rather than passivity, which we see in many learners, particularly as they move through school, and then making informed choices about the best methods for learning, and how much guidance and repeated guidance is needed for learners through that. So this was a tool that we thought might be quite useful for you. A little bit of a handy takeaway. Okay, Deb, I think it's back to you. Apologies, that was rushed and a very quick guide.
Okay, thanks, Jane. So yeah, we hope that you're able to take some of these resources and do some reflection, maybe with your senior leadership team or with some of your leaders back at school. But again, if you want us to come and support those conversations, we're more than happy to do so. So the last few just key messages, really. Many of you've already alluded to the fact that you've already got independent learners an SDP priority. We've shared with you an exemplar that one of the schools in the pilot group have designed their SDP priority this year. So we've shared an example that you might find useful. So please feel free to use that to help shape or refine yours if you find it helpful. And really just thinking about now your next step. So it's the magic word in terms of capturing impact and what we'd like you to think about maybe as you move forward into your visits and thinking about your development across the year. The first thing, really, really quickly, is that when you're developing any change or when you're leading any school improvement priority, it takes time. Okay, so if this is year one or you've just started experimenting, it's going to take you quite a long time to develop this provision. So please be realistic in your expectations of yourselves as leaders, of how you want to move things through. You may still be, you've identified in terms of the need for improvement. So you may well be in this experimentation phase. Or you may well have started experimenting and you're moving to develop provision across the school. So think about that realistically in terms of your development processes and planning and realistic timescales for what you're expecting to move and shift realistically over time. The next thing we'd say as you move through this journey is thinking about, you've been on a professional learning experience this morning. We've probably shared far too much, but changing practice and behaviour takes time, and that starts with you as individuals and your staff and your team. So thinking about how you're going to take people through the change process, understanding those characteristics of independent learning, and when you're going to start seeing that change in practice and behaviour. So if you say, right, we're going to focus on, the role of the adult, you need some professional learning, it starts with you because you've joined us today and you've got your SDP, but thinking about how you manage that change around their behaviours, how you support them to lead others, how you make wider impact across your school in terms of developing that independent learning provision. So just a cautious note around thinking about the role of your SDP and how that changes that behaviour over time. And you'll see from the timescales there, it does take time, particularly if independent learning is but one of maybe a few priorities that you have on your SDP. All of your staff are dealing with all of that amount of change. So, research says we've got to be realistic about that. So just a few pointers there in terms of that. So possible next steps for you. We hope that you go and visit some of our schools and settings and see that independent learning in action. Thank you to those of you who've joined the team. If you haven't yet, I've sent you a link via email, so please join the team, and everything that we share with you will be added, all the documentation, so you can have your own version, share with your SLT, so on and so forth. We'd invite you to consider evaluating your provision right now as a baseline if you've not done anything recently. So go with a fresh pair of eyes and listen to all of our reflections we've had today and think about where is it that you want to start moving and focusing on first. Think about, your teaching and learning strategy. Hopefully you've got a clear way of communicating your broader expectations around teaching and learning. think about where independent learning sits within that, and think about those characteristics of independent learning that we talked about today. Think about what you want from the visits in relation to your SDP, because sometimes you can go and be bombarded with all the wonderful things, and it's about being precise and thinking about what you want to get out from your visits, because you won't be able to do everything, because as we know, everything takes time, and those schools that you've been visiting have been working on this for a number of years. So if this is a new priority for you, be realistic in your expectations. There may be the opportunity for you to continually refine your SDP, because it is a working document based on what you've heard today, based on maybe some of the things we shared, and based on some of the visits. So be prepared to be agile and refine that as you go along. And what we'd like to invite you to do is be prepared to come back at the end of November, after you've done your visits, after you've looked at your SDP, and talk about what things have started to change. What are you hoping to do on your next phase of development, and thinking about any other support. Like I've mentioned, as a team, we're available to come and support you in a variety of different ways. And similarly, those schools that are generally partner schools, they have some capacity to work alongside schools, particularly on this very focused area. So I'm really sorry I've rushed through that, but a massive thank you to Gaynor and Jane for joining me and taking us all through that this morning. If we can just take one more minute to give us some reflections on this session, because it's the first time we've done this as a brand new programme, and we hope that you can give us some feedback so that we continually can refine our professional learning offer to you. I know we've given you a lot of information today, and probably too much, so my reflection is we could have done this over 2 sessions as an introductory session. But if you can give us a bit of feedback, we really, really appreciate it. Please keep in touch. We won't be able to be at all the school visits. I hope we might be able to join 1 or 2, but please keep in touch and reach out to us if we can help you in any way at all on your future journey to create the greatest independent learners across the region. So lovely to hear from you if you need any further help. And we'll see you at the end of November if we don't see you before.